This is one of a series of videos to explain the setup and operation of the WW9JD Arduino µMatic² memory keyer. I am Rick Dubbs, WW9JD. In this segment, we're going to look at attaching the hardware necessary so you can attach keyer paddles on the end of the keyer. Right now, I have the QRP guys paddles attached to my original keyer, which uses a 1B board. And here is a little bit better look at that attachment. What you have on there are a couple of 632 standoffs. I'm using 632 thumb screws to attach the QRP guys paddles. QRP guys paddles, unfortunately, are retired, so those are no longer available. Also, the keyers that go with the KX3 directly don't use 632 hardware. That was an oversight on my part. They use 440 hardware. Even with a change in hardware, we're still going to mount it the same way, and the technique I use is using some more epoxy putty to mount those standoffs directly onto the board. I'm using the QRP guys keyer for alignment. But what if you want to use a key that's designed for the KX3 that has captured thumb screws in it that are not like what I have here? How do you mount that? The only difference in mounting a dedicated KX3 paddles to the keyer is to use the screws that are captured in the paddles to attach 440 standoffs instead of 632 standoffs to both of the thumb screws on the paddles, to mix up some epoxy putty, put a little dab on it just like we did for the switch, install that paddle into the electrical socket, electrical pins that are already there for the paddles, and then let it cure for about an hour. Don't worry if you get epoxy putty on the standoffs, because they can stay there for the rest of their lives. That's not a problem. But what if you want to install those standoffs without having the actual keyer available? You just want to get it ready for future paddles or whatever. How can you get that done? You can. The first thing you're going to need to do is to work with the standoffs, because the standoffs really intrude on the space that the standoffs are going to need to be. So you're going to need, I took a Dremel and used a sanding drum to take off a little bit. You'll see how much you have to take off. This side needed more than this side did. But without that KX3 paddle, what are you going to do? This is what I did. I built a jig to stand in for the KX3 paddles from some perf board and just a small section of female standoff. This perf board is, let's see if I get it in focus. This perf board is the same size as perf board, we'll go this another way. What's considered SB404 perf board is the same spacing as a standard BB400 solderless breadboard, and it just so happens, I have no idea if it was coincidence or not, but the spacing on the KX3 has the holes for the 440 thumb screws exactly the place that the standoff holes are on this 440 perf board, and the two female header pins go just a couple of spaces over beside this one. So you can use a piece of this perf board to build a jig. The female section is too long, so I used a couple of lock washers to space this out so that these standoffs would end up in the right place once I finally got it done. Okay, we talked about the epoxy putty before, And so I've mixed it up. I've kneaded it for about 30 seconds. I'm going to press it onto the board. Make sure it's making contact on the board there. Try to get these standoffs so that they are perpendicular to the board. The paddles, I believe, will allow for a little variance and they'll work just fine. Now, I don't own dedicated KX3 paddles. I just have the QRP guys paddles. So I've never tried captured thumb screw paddles in this. Don't know when I ever will. Just pressing it down on there, and I'm looking to see that this is evenly spaced around the edge. I'm checking to see that my standoffs here are pretty much at the edge. I'm liking alignment and everything, so I'm just going to let this go for an hour-ish and let that cure. Come back and check it later with my QRP guys key, or I have no idea when I'll ever be able to have a chance to check it with an actual KX3 key paddle. As I said, I can't be certain about a KX3 paddle with captured thumb screws, but here is the QRP guys paddle mounted on WW9JD Arduino µMatic² memory keyer using the 440 hardware supplied by the QRP guys. And the keyer works just fine.